part of changing models. Well, look, personally, I think the Labour Party will be in a correct position on this, and Keir Starmer's made that pretty clear. So I don't, you know,
Huh?
No, I've always had a high regard for J.K. Rowling, and I think that this is
What have you been like?
absolutely, you know, it's important just to distinguish between trying to treat people fairly when they have a genuine feeling that they're a person in the who feels that even though biologically they are one sex, that they really want to be another. We should absolutely be sensitive to that and treat people fairly. But we shouldn't end up in a situation where we deny the biology, because that's I don't understand how that really helps people that are suffering from what is otherwise a condition that's extremely difficult.
And finally, there's another intriguing thing you said in your article, that there was a challenge in the Muslim community. Now we know that the Labour Party lost some significant win in areas with high Muslim populations. And some of the candidates, not least someone you know well, Wes Streeting, who did win.
插住電睇啊，講插住電睇啊。
What is the question you want to return to, albeit that you're not yet ready to set out your thinking on it?
Well, at the moment, I'm just simply saying if you list the things that come out of this election, because there were lots of things that were very traditional about it, and then there were a lot of aspects that were quite unique about it in our experience. And one of those was the election, obviously, of people from the Muslim community in opposition to Labour or Conservative candidates. And it's something we need to go into, but I think we need to go into it in depth and not,
You return to that.
yeah.
Now, you're having this big conference today. In the past, you've talked of learning from the experience of President Macron. As you look at the results in France, you look at the results here, do you sometimes think this is the last chance for the centre? That you guys have been in power, and there is rejection to certain things. There is very expensive repulsion coming from the left and right. People saying, we don't know what you're doing, we're trying something else instead.
Well, okay. Well, this, in the end, I mean, whatever political position you take, it's always going to come up to fire.
Well, in your adult lifetime, you have never seen a splintering approach to politics on the right of that way.
Yes, but I think that's the important thing, is that it is splintering generally. And it's splintering both to the left and to the right. And I think when you analyse Western politics globally today, you either have a situation where there's disruption inside political parties, like you see this with the Republican Party and the Progressive Republican Party, or there's the system, the electoral system, offers a lot of elections, and there are lots of parties going to the situation of parties. The parties there, the main parties, that want to go to the so probably
Joe Biden seems sincerely and absolutely determined to run for president. But with each passing day, age and a swelling squad of senior Democrats are confronting, saying he's suggesting some strategy might last another 4 months. A short time ago, I spoke to other American Sarah Smith.
Certainly looks as though he has dug his heels in very firmly and is not going to allow any distortion. It's very interesting. He is pointing out everything that he is a candidate when he needs to make a decision to step down, but that there are 42 days voted for him to be the candidate in the primary process. Now, of course, he didn't really have any significant challenges in that primary process, but he is out telling his party that it would be fundamentally undemocratic to try and nudge him aside because he's the one that was chosen by the party, and he's casting this as though it is him, the insurgent in underdog, against what he describes as the party's elites, as well as its millionaire donors and the press. And this is a campaign Joe Biden has made many times in the past before, saying that he's not being chosen representative of the chattery classes, if you like, but that he's a strong underdog who can get in there and win. The problem is convincing that so many people have seen him losing his train of thought. It's a difficult way to try and convince people that he is the fight and people's got what it takes to win this one.
I think he regards himself as an insurgent for a long time. In the late 60s, he got to the Seventh of Delaware in 1973. What is the feeling about who might be able to influence him? Is it ultimately this kind of, I guess, some cliche people, ultimately the only person who will say so that is his wife Jill?
Possibly, it's just a matter of it's him and a very, very close section, mostly family. And what's become very clear over the last few days in this process is just quite how small Biden's circle is of people who can be honest with him and tell him the truth about what's going on out there and affect his decision.
Look at
And there may be many, many more behind the scenes
What's that?
who know that
My Minecraft video
press,
got
rather than
36
public
views in just
much
a day.
more
What, man?
My Minecraft video just got
and then
36
post
views.
Trump out via the
8 hours.
probably
8 hours.
just spring
Can you
to
believe it?
stay in.
8
And yet
hours.
they're coordinating to save Joe's campaign after that disastrous first debate, wasn't there? Barack Obama among those.
Am I better audio?
Went
Is it
public
better audio one?
It was just a bad night. So there is a very coordinated attempt by people close to Biden to make sure that in public he has the support of big names.
The problem with that was, although everybody else went public
You know,
very shortly after the debate, Joe Biden
係咪
was
聽得
hardly
清楚
seen for
而家？
about a week, and when he was, it was in very tightly scripted
比較
circumstances. So the way he's been fighting back in the last 48 hours or so, with lots and lots of public events and calling into television shows, sending this very punchy letter to Democrats in Congress saying that there's no way he's stepping aside. If he'd done all of this a week ago, it's just possible that he would have calmed people's fears by now. But because it took him so long to start trying to convince people that he is actually up to this job and that he has got the stamina required for the campaign, that set off people's fears that it all just looks a little bit inept. It's possibly all been a little bit too late, and there was enough of a head of steam around concerns about Joe Biden had gathered before he tried to tackle them. His problem this week is that he will be distracted by hosting a NATO summit in Washington with over 30 world leaders coming to visit him. Keir Starmer gets a one-on-one meeting on Wednesday, and then the next big test is Thursday. At the end of that NATO summit, he does a full press conference live with unscripted questions, what was described by the White House spokesperson today as a big boy press conference. That will be watched very, very carefully to see how he handles that kind of interaction. Possible that he could release views on his candidacy right after that, but only very, very little.
And finally, so how late can Democrats go in fighting Biden?
Well, that's a very interesting question. There are 6 weeks until the convention in which they will finally nominate their candidate. Up until then, everyone's just up to the candidate. If Joe Biden's taking standing aside, the means by which they select that candidate is being widely debated. Lots and lots of Democrats weighing in with their views on how it should be done. It's not clear how many people would want to get involved in that. Now, there is this coalescing around Kamala Harris from especially the Congressional Black Caucus coming out and saying that if Biden steps aside, it absolutely has to be by its President Harris. It may be that she is just assumed into the vote rather than ever actually being part of the process.
Sarah Smith in Washington, always been such a thank you.
28 minutes to know. Rob is here with Sporting Simpson from Shorts.
You think so? Yes. Good morning, Nick. The Sun's newspaper front page headline this morning: "Referee nightmare." Picked up on the appointment of Felix Speyer as match referee for World Tour 2024 semi-final between England and the Netherlands. Speyer received a 6-month ban and a fine after being investigated for taking bribe in a match fixing scandal that was allowed back into the game on review. That's further twist, England star Jude Bellingham, who was playing a few years ago for the German football authorities on reference and status act. Tonight, it's the first semi-final, Spain against France, the first of eight conference the commentary. The four remaining singles quarterfinals of Wimbledon take place today. The highlights, well, Sinner versus Medvedev, first up on centre court, Campus Real, but then so does Alcaraz against Paul, second on number one. That's preceded by Son, who is now playing on Sunday, remember, against Vekic, with Carlin against Nadal, second for the second. All good then. Coverage, of course. Well, now to the immediate past of British ambitions in Formula One, and also its long-term future. As you remember, perhaps, that the first three places on the starting grid at Sunday's Silverstone Grand Prix were occupied by British drivers. The centre court,
No, yeah, of course it was Runa. It's Runa, and that's been happening for a couple of years now. And I think everywhere Holger Runa in Denmark goes, the crowd kind of gets involved. It's almost become something that's a tradition when he's playing. And, you know, it's very tough because the match was straightforward, pretty straightforward for Novak Djokovic, 7-time champion at Wimbledon. So maybe they wanted to get involved. Maybe they wanted the match to become a little bit closer. And the thing is that it wasn't just for winners, it was also for unforced errors for Novak. So I think it would get under his skin. He'd be a little on edge, especially because he had knee surgery early June, so he feels like they did have the prep coming into Wimbledon. But, you know, at that point, the match is over. You won in 3 sets. That's probably a time where Novak would probably say, you know, that was tough to play, but I understand it was true enough. That happens all the time.
He could let it go, couldn't he? But when he said, I know the tricks to the deliberate spot.
Yeah, I mean, you know, he blew a kiss, what was it, last year or the year before, when he walked out the court after he played Nori. So the problem...
Yeah, no, what we're in there,
Yeah, the problem that you have is you're so good. You've won 24 majors, the most majors of anybody, you know, on the men's side, and you've won 7 here at Wimbledon, and you're winning easily, and so oftentimes they just root for the underdog, and so it's a difficult situation for all.
But it is a different personality, isn't it? They never rooted for the underdog with Roger Federer. They are to score enough time. People love Roger Federer. He just won it every year for the rest of the century. People would still be changing.
Well, yeah, it's hard to go into. There's everybody just different personalities, right? And I think that's what brings the fans, that there's personality out there for everyone. And I think Roger, you're right, Roger wouldn't have taken it personally, but it wouldn't have happened to Roger or Rafa at all.
And given that the injury, can he win the
Well, I think he had a fortunate draw. There was no dangerous floater in the first or the second round. So he's been able to work his way into the quarterfinals, play a match day off, and now plays Di Minor. Di Minor from Australia is a tough competitor. He's got Musetti and Prince in the other quarterfinals there. So again, I think those are players that are lower ranked and used to playing that deep in a major. And then on the other side, of course, you have Sinner and Alcaraz, you know, constantly beating each other up. So the answer is yes, or without the yes, but 37 years old, Novak could tie Roger Federer with the most at 8.
Tracy Austin, thank you very much. But looking at the youngsters, of course, I should make sure it's on. I applaud at all times.
Let's do it. 11 minutes tonight at the Stoke House. There are a record high 113,000 homeless families, or single adults living in temporary accommodation in England. But there are also 261,000 long-term empty homes. So we need those unused properties back into use to be a solution to homelessness. Simon Mabey has been investigating that question for Final Four and has been following one council doing pioneering work.
So, on the right hand side here, we've got the main arterial route into Wigan. And you'll see this has caused a lot of problems to the property.
That's just the one I can see on the end there.
Yeah.
So it's got boarded up windows downstairs.
Yeah, it's boarded up downstairs.
He was told he used to be a police officer, but is now Wigan Council's Housing Standards Manager. It's October, and he's showing me some of the empty homes they're trying to get back into use.
But
a lot of antisocial behaviour. We've had fires, we've had drug users getting in there.
Turning unused properties into homes again means dealing with the unique circumstances of each case.
You know, we have got the option to compulsory purchase if we needed to, and very, very few cases are we actually sort of actively looking at that, because it can be quite draconian to literally just take somebody's house off them.
More often, Neil tries to engage with owners constructively, encouraging them to sell and linking them up with developers, with the threat of compulsory purchase in his back pocket to provide an impetus if necessary. Empty homes can be problems in themselves. They're also a waste of a much-needed resource.
Yeah, like this dog is quite loud, but it's on it.
Down the road in Bolton, I meet Lisa, who was evicted by her landlord who decided to sell up. She couldn't find anywhere else she could afford to rent for her and her daughter. Just like that, they were homeless.
Yeah, I'm scared, I'm terrified. It's horrible, like a shit alive. You want to be able to sort of protect your child, and then when you have nowhere to live, it's horrible. Really horrible.
They joined the record numbers of homeless families living in limbo, stuck in often unsuitable temporary accommodation. And this poor temporary accommodation, how long will you be here?
Yeah, that's as good as mine. I could get a phone call tomorrow to say that property's become available, but then I could be here 6 months, I could be longer. I've known people in temporary accommodation for years.
Empty homes work can be slow and laborious. Owners can take months to track down. Sometimes their investors who run out of money, or landlords with other priorities. Sometimes houses sit unused long after an owner has died because one relative brought another to benefit from the sale.
You know, like you said, getting involved in families, massive sense of years of issues within the family that affect the life. And we're not afraid to talk about the issues either.
Neil's also recently found the problem that supposedly occupied houses actually get used as cannabis farms. But his proactive approach to it is working. 9 months on from first showing me the house that had become a maximum social behaviour, it's now being done up by a local developer who also buys into Neil's social mission. This is Andy Lyon from Winston Property.
By local people, having on that, you know, it's kind of acceptable that everything must be either an owner's empty property or a property that's or whatever, but that's the job. But again, one thing that's more our job is well, that was Simon Cave. It's 7 minutes to 9, but I think it's when we have training schools, they're missing often expected consequences. It can be enforced by but not in help with the university. 10,000 people per year. They won't be 24 hours, then 30, then 40. But then, this, or rather than security emergency response, they will have leak when alive, then 22-year-old and 18-year-old bodies are for knowing the treatment frail, but so other than that, having succeeded today. Good to see you all. How are you? Long 5 minutes. First things first, thank goodness you're safely well. But secondly, absolutely idiots. Why did you charge your marriage company? What was going on?
Yeah, we were very, very, very serious.
What did you go on? First time, have you apologised to your mother?
Oh,
yeah. A piece then. Well, we did have you guys. What would you like to say to your mum?
we are very, very sorry.
We're so sorry for putting you through everything. We love you so much and you don't deserve it at all.
Thank you very much for this. So, go on, where did it all go wrong? So, what happened?
Well, there's a lack of preparation initially. We didn't do it nowhere near as much research as we needed. We ended up going off a path which was closed without us knowing because we followed this app. We saw headlights up the mountain ahead of us, which were tour guides in groups, but they were going up a different path. So we were going through the middle of the night to see the sunrise. Our phones died when we made it to the top. had no way to find the path down, and then was just stranded on the mountain.
Absolute panic.
Yeah. I think we kept our cool relatively well, but as we were going up, we kept on thinking, right, we've seen these lights at this point, the phones are getting quite low on charge. We think it's better to carry on going up and try and find some of these guides to get us back down safely, but no, we couldn't find it.
How much trouble did you get in? So as you did go that far, what happened?
We got up, so we came out the shelter, super open road, and then the higher we went, the less shrubbery, and it became very rocky. And we got to the top, and it was sheer fall down into the volcano. No way to navigate around the top to meet the guys. So when it started to rain, we found the river 4-foot rocks. We followed the rocks down, very slippery, and it was just like, if you just followed the river down, so eventually, for sure, civilization.
Do you fear the worst?
But we tried to avoid talking about it, but I think we both knew in our heads, we knew to keep our spirits high and also keep focused.
And meanwhile, Catherine, you're meant to be kind of challenged. You find out who's gone about your boat.
So I was trying to contact them 6 o'clock on Thursday, the day of the boat, to have an interview to go to the hospital, and couldn't get hold of them, which was weird. And I looked on the phone now, I saw them 2 days ago, I think they were paying. Then a friend of theirs got in touch and said we got worried about them. Luckily, a Swedish friend they'd made, while they were in Vietnam, had been in touch with them and screenshots on the way up. She knew that they'd lost contact 30 hours ago. She reported them missing the night before, thank God. So people already knew. I was certainly going to the foreigners. The foreigners were incredible. They had people out there, and then I sent a very panic message to some of my local friendship group. Pretty much galvanised and armed. People got work, they came to my house, they sent messages, they got messages on social media to all the hospitals in Bali, to guides going up and down, and it was everywhere, and all their friends were sending in nurses, and technology is part of what saved them, and it really got them into trouble.
When
They should have had a
they
guide.
came in here and they flamed me out straight away. Did you watch any of the Bear Grylls in preparation to get, to work your way out of these streets?
They were scouts. They grew up going to scouts, and they did what you do. They watched a lot of them.
Growing up with my dad in the country, what distinctly remembering is seeing when he followed the river down, collecting rainwater.
Wow.
You made a shelter, you made a nice little one.
I didn't realise you didn't have to sell the film rights.
That's what mum's been saying, yeah.
Catherine, you survived huge sense of relief in there. I was never going near volcano ever again.
Yeah, I'd spoken to them on Monday, and it was very brief because I was with the then Prime Minister, and she that, and one of the main visits, and about half the time I mentioned the hike. I didn't know the details, and I just said to them, really quick, be careful, don't go off in the air, people get lost, people might be easy, people go to please die, etc., and that is exactly what it's like.
Oh, man.
And so when I spoke
That's the name of the film right there.
when I spoke to the girl Sarah outside Tunbridge in the River Guide, and I said,
it's actually quite
listen to your mother.
Guys, listen to your mother. Just to listen to you guys. But look, you made it. You're alive, and it's so good to see you. And I hope you never anywhere near volcano again. Catherine, Matthew, Andrew, see you later.
You are not stupid. Remember that.
A few seconds to tell you about the latest Today podcast of what I recorded yesterday, looking at latest hopes to stimulate growth, the subject we talked to Tony Blair about earlier on, and also look at what the French election represents. On that. Today podcast. That is all from us. Editors were Josh Pearl and Josh Wilson, Studio Director. Today.
BBC News at 9 o'clock. Sir Keir Starmer has been meeting England's metro mayors this morning after pledging to loosen Whitehall's control of the big cities and regions. Officials say the discussions will begin the process of shifting power out of Westminster. New Levelling Up Minister Jim McMahon said one key reform will be the way money is handed out.
What we're seeing with the government previously is just how kind of fragmented it was.
you know, you'll be talking to so many different departments in a scattered way. It'd be a central bidding process, and so you'd be bidding in all the time for different pots of money. And I think almost maybe the biggest thing that we will do is having a single settlement, a single pot of money for our metro men to get on to do the job that they've been elected to do.
The Prime Minister faces a busy day afterwards too, with a second full meeting of his new cabinet, followed by his first turn at the House of Commons dispatch box in his new role. He then takes a flight to Washington to attend the NATO summit. In the US, a senior Democrat rallied his voice to calls for Joe Biden to step aside from the presidential race. Congressman Adam Smith said the president's recent performance in the televised debate with Donald Trump had been alarming. Thames Water says it made a pre-tax profit of £157 million in the year to the end of June, compared to just £1.8 million in the previous year. But its end-of-year financial figures show that debts also increased. A snap inspection of one of the UK's main immigration removal centres at Harmonswell in West London has found truly shocking conditions. Chief Inspector of Prisons, Charlie Taylor, visited the centre in February. He alerted the then Home Secretary James Cleverly to his finding, but received no response. The Home Office said it took the welfare of detainees very seriously. European Space Agency's new heavy lift rocket, the Ariane 6, will launch for the first time from French Guiana this evening. It's hoped the spacecraft will become a major workhorse for European governments building communications hardware in space. BBC News.
This is BBC News Report. Half an hour we'll be continuing our series all about innovations in the treatment of mental health conditions. Today exploring how people who hear sinister voices and experience paranoia could be helped by new talking therapies. Is psychiatry working? Is it 9:30? But first this hour in the Life Scientific, our focus is the work going on in the field of eating disorders, as Professor Jim Al-Khalili discusses past research and possible future breakthroughs in this area.
Hello, today we're talking about eating disorders, a term covering a range of conditions, from anorexia nervosa to binge eating. These conditions, physically and emotionally damaging and potentially fatal, have proved extremely difficult to diagnose and treat, not least because those affected often don't recognise or acknowledge that there's anything wrong. But my guest today has made huge inroads in furthering our understanding of the field, and has helped to dispel some of the stigma around these disorders. Janet Treasure is a professor of psychiatry at the Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology and Neuroscience at King's College London. Her research is all about the relationship between disorder behaviour and the brain, trying to get a handle on what drives such conditions and developing more effective treatments. Her study of twins in the 1980s offered one of the earliest arguments in favour of a genetic link to anorexia nervosa, rather than the purely psychological motivation that was generally accepted at the time. Janet is emphatic that increasing awareness and changing attitudes around eating disorders is vital. She says the old model was all about privacy and confidentiality, and we need to move on from that. Sure, we need to be sensitive, but there used to be real stigma, an idea you couldn't talk about. Now that's changing. There's more openness, and that can only be a good thing. Professor Janet Treasure, welcome to the Life Scientific.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Now, eating disorders is a term that covers a whole range of behaviours, as I mentioned. To start off, can you give me a sense of how common they are in the UK today?
That's a difficult question to answer because they were known about in 1888 and named anorexia nervosa was, but bulimia nervosa was only named in 1979, and some of the newer eating disorders were only named in 2015. So without knowing what we're looking for, the counting has been difficult. And then bringing up an issue you talked about, there's this conflict that people can see it, but the individual themselves doesn't see that there's anything wrong and doesn't want to change. So when you're asking them what is wrong, they don't say. So that could be a difficulty counting. We know that when we went house to house looking for all eating disorders in adults, only 20% who had it had been to the doctors for treatment.
So it's difficult to count, but the children and young people's mental health study by
fairly quickly, but tell me what needs to slow down.
At first, I can see Molly's clicking on posts about boy bands. and fitting, fashion. Yeah, that's it, right. Yeah, sort of really quite deep discussions but the mood is starting to shift. How you describe that sort of
get the blades, depression, get the blades.
we still don't know exactly what was pushed algorithmically at Molly and what she sought out herself. Meta didn't provide very details of everything Instagram had recommended. From everything I know about how these engagement-based algorithms work, it looks to me like the platform is learning something about Molly that she hardly knows herself. Is that cutting? No one inside Instagram or Pinterest is making predictive decisions about what Molly should see on her phone or broadcast. It's simply machines ordering content trying to give Molly stuff in a small way. Automated cruelty, isn't it? Some machines just generated a selection of interests they determined from her patterns of behaviour and said, you'd like these. I don't think for the state this harmful content. The harmful content, I think, would have done lots of things to 14 years. It would have normalised the thought processes that she was beginning to develop. So as soon as she started thinking about anxiety, depression related to depression, that's exactly the process that gets further from the dangerous route to stop. And the algorithms that further thousands of pieces of research and the 24/7 actually, it's pretty simple. I can see what suicide symptoms feels like you're inside their head. It's hard to define the content. Much of it isn't graphic and doesn't explicitly encourage self-harm, but it's becoming relentless, suffocating the same depressing images over and over.
The last 100, sorry for being so fucked up, sorry for being such a failure, sorry for being disgraced, sorry for being me. You said you would never hurt me, and I left me, and I can't hurt you. Not too graphic as some others, but incredibly bleak and hopeless.
I realised something as I watched all of this content. It wasn't any one single image or screen grab was discouraging. I've seen this kind of stuff before. It's the cumulative effect, image after image. It makes me feel like I'm under some kind of horrible, confusing spell. Maybe that's how Mom felt. She was surrounded by it all the time. I can show you the Who Would Love a Suicide Girl there that simply says this world is so cruel and I don't want to see it anymore. Again, it's all like a sketch. This time there's a girl in bed
tetra, the bandage around her head, and the dark marks where her eyes are, eyes that have been gouged out or something, liked by Molly Russell and 2,432 others. Looking at these posts, I guess most of them probably didn't break content guidelines on Instagram or Pinterest. But should these companies have made this so accessible and sometimes even recommended to a 13-year-old girl who was obviously already watching so much of it? It's this recommendation engine, the algorithm, that Arturo thinks is the problem. It's about the fundamental design.
The fact that it doesn't violate policy doesn't mean that it should be recommended. Like there's no world in which it makes sense to recommend for 13-year-old self-harm content, body image, inspiration content. I think whenever you think any one of these terrible things, that really becomes a question. Yes, it is really more that the answer is we said to the concept here, we're actually recommending it or personalizing it.
That doesn't seem to. It's annoying, it sort of makes me angry hearing you say it, because it feels like it shouldn't be too difficult to do.
Yeah, and yeah, right?
November 2017, a year since Donald Trump's election that pushed tech companies into moving forward to keep their sights set. Molly, her mum, Dad Ian, and her sisters are all sitting downstairs together watching the start of a new series of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. Molly's on her phone. Over the last couple of months, Ian had started to think what William was getting at. Commenting on that sense of community that Indigenous people have, that's not sort of everything, does it? That's a good thing. Along with chat about I'm a Celebrity, Molly's sending messages to her friends, scrolling platforms. Was she sane, supposed? The worst thing depression did to me was take my intelligence. Feeling yourself getting dumber and dumber is absolutely painful. Later that evening, Ian pops his head round Molly's bedroom door to say goodnight, as he did every night. I don't believe Molly tried to go to sleep. So I can only assume there was some other outside influence, and it could only have come through her phone. It might have been a message, it might have been algorithmically suggested content, but something tipped her into a place. And she just said, this is the time I'm going to live my life.
And so, was it the next morning you went in there?
We all got up the next day and went about our normal daily lives. And I was downstairs in the kitchen with my wife, and she said, "Where's Molly?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know, she'll be somewhere." My wife went off to have a look, and then I heard a scream, and I rushed up to see what on earth that could be about. And as I got to the top of the stairs, I went to Molly's bedroom, and she just said, "Don't go in there." I said, "I am going." And I went into Molly's bedroom, and I saw her lifeless body. And I stopped, because it was impossible to comprehend what was obviously in front of me. And then I lay her down on the floor and thought, who might say that she's dead, and began CPR. We called it 911. A paramedic turned up within minutes. Absolutely, it was amazing. Came in and I remember saying, I think this is it. one question I stopped and said, keep on doing what you're doing. And there's electrodes on one story, listen to have with his stethoscope, and he looked under and said, I've got some very sad news. Stop now. Sorry to so sorry to hear that. I think even in that, at that time, there was an absolute burning need to go, what on earth has caused this? So that unremarkable domestic North West London life broke the morning we woke up and found the state. And that's fractured, there's no way. I mean, my life is in two parts, the life before Molly died and the life after. Molly died by suicide, aged 14. For weeks afterwards, Pinterest kept sending her those emails. Maybe Molly would like to see the top 10 pins on depression or some new self-harm content. The decision to take your own life is extremely complex, and most of the time there's no single event or factor. But Ian Russell has no doubt where responsibility should lie. It's been said by many of her friends and family, none of us wait to find out what she'd do with her life when she grew up. And what took that spark of future potential, what took her away from us? It wasn't long before we looked at it.
But the spirituality and religious significance of walking. I'm Giles Fraser, and with me are three walkers of faith who've spent many hours considering the connections between walking and the great mysteries of the universe. Phil McCarthy, former GP, he used to be the CEO of Caritas, but now he runs this project called Hearts in Search of God, which seeks out new pilgrim ways for the 22 dioceses of the Catholic Church in England and Wales. Welcome to you. Really looking forward to hearing more about this. And Sri Radharamana Dasa is a scholar in Sanskrit and Vedic literature. He serves as a community member at the Bhaktivedanta Mana, the Hare Krishna Temple in Watford. Welcome to you.
Thank you so much for allowing me to be here and to make the story of that.
Okay, great. Really nice to have you. Professor Raminder Kaur is Professor of Anthropology and Cultural Studies at the University of Sussex and the leader of the Pilgrinomics project. Have I got that right? What's that mean?
A combination of pilgrimage and economic.
Wonderful. That's great. How interesting. So, okay, boots laced up. Let's begin this. I want to know, perhaps, Phil, instinctively we know you were a GP, we know the health benefits of going for a walk. But what is the sort of spiritual aspect of this, religious aspect of this, particularly in the Catholic tradition?
Well, it's a long tradition. It goes right back to the old Catholic Church, and it's something that has always been important. There's always been a balance between the journey, the importance and significance of the journey itself, and the significance of the destination. Both, I think, are important. I would say, in terms of spirituality, one of the things that we keep on just said is, of course, is courage. And I think that's a really important virtue of pilgrimage or any long distance pilgrimage. But a pilgrimage particularly is a humble journey, and I think that's one of the things that really is characteristic of it.
It's there in the Christian scriptures, in quite significant. I think of the road to Emmaus, I guess, and that's the beautiful story of those who are walking the road out of Jerusalem, 7 miles to Emmaus, and they don't know who they're with, and it turns out that they were with Jesus.
Exactly. So we know that Jesus was a man who walked around, we've got dirty feet and dapples blisters. But in this story, we see two of the disciples walking in the opposite direction. They're walking away from their own site, and they're walking in confusion, and they share this confusion with a stranger that they meet. So there's several important parts of the characteristics of pilgrimage in that. The encounter with the other. There's the transformatory moment when they change from being frightened people running away into becoming people who are filled with courage and spirit and go back to the place of danger, back to Jerusalem. Radharamana, I don't know enough about the Hare Krishna spirituality of walking, but what I do know is, like many Londoners, I love the sight of Hare Krishnas walking, particularly not since I know. Could you tell me a little bit about the spirituality of those walks?
Yes, absolutely. Walking is in fact a core fundamental practice from living on yoga. So in yoga, the term of walking includes power, and walking is considered to be an activity which I think Alice summarized quite well. It allows the body, the mind, and the soul to reconnect into its true purpose. In the Sanskrit scriptures, that I'd love to share with you, they it basically means that the physical body is actually a temple of the expansion of God, situated within the heart. And walking allows the physical body to place the deity within the body back in its body abode. And therefore in India, there are not but there are literally tens of thousands of slaves of April pilgrimage where people can visit to reconnect with the true essential spiritual being, and most importantly, take that back with them into rekindle that sacredness that has captured the body, which is unfortunately in the social world community.
Professor Kaur, isn't there a sort of history of suspicion of pilgrimages among Sikhs?
That's very interesting, and yes, there is. It's an ironic situation. So, for instance, Guru Nanak Dev, who's the founder of Sikhism in the 16th century, he talked about the Ajsat Tirtha, 68 places of pilgrimage, where at the time Hindus were going there for Ishnaan, which is a spiritual type of bathing, in order to get the spiritual liberation. And he noticed that these rituals are very empty, people that are going through the emotions of it, but not the divine spirituality and connection that you need. And he said that actually pilgrimage has to start from home, and only the home that will serve your own, to connect with your own self. And that is the ultimate pilgrimage. Having said that, we have very discounted the value of pilgrimage. He was one of the British monarchs that we know about.
Isn't he known as the Wanderer?
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, they say he's the second most travelled author in the world after Ibn Battuta, an Arab scholar. He decided to go on Augustus, which actually means detached from travel, or it could even be melancholic travel. And one of the reasons he wanted to do that was because he saw emptiness around him. He wanted to regenerate people's faith in the ultimate, i.e. in God, which is divine and and he did that through walking with his Muslim musician friend Mardana, and he played the rabab on his Nanak Dev Ji, walked, and then sometimes they sat down and they started doing kirtan, which is singing, and then people would gather around them, and then again they would have some discourse and get up and go on to the next destination. And he did this on 4 major occasions. He went all the way to Mecca on one occasion, and then went down to Sri Lanka and up to India on another occasion. So he did do a lot of wandering, but that wandering was not for converting other people. It's more about learning about God again, learning about the route to the divine through the self, through the soul.
Why can't you learn about God at home?
But he actually says you can. But I think after he advocated the need to be a grihasta, the householder, he had done that duty. Now he got to a stage where he felt that the world needed regenerating, and he wanted to walk with that.
One of the things about walking, Phil, is that you meet people. It's actually a sort of, you're out in public, like walking the dog, I suppose, not just pilgrimages, but when you're out walking, it's the one of those points of contact and so forth. And it's a great place for sort of building up connections and stories, and these stories that come about meeting people on the road. They're extraordinary, aren't they? They are.
In 2008, I walked from Canterbury to Rhodes, and it was a wonderful opportunity to meet people that I wouldn't normally do in my life as GP, where I was very stable and working in one place and practiced for 4 years. Here I was a rather marginal, transient person
But I realise that the sort of conversations which you have when you meet other people in those situations can be very profound. It's that walking alongside someone when you know you're vulnerable to the elements, and you're often dependent on the kindness of strangers. Those two things really bring you to a sense of community very fast.
That vulnerability, I mean, you know, on a nice day, it's absolutely glorious thing to do. And one imagines it's a romantic view of walking and so forth. But when it's hammering it down, okay, there is an element of endurance about this.
There certainly is. You have to keep going. Sometimes it's keeping going when it's very, very boring. And times when I walked across the Alps in deep snow when it's actually quite a bit scary when you're on your own. So yeah, it's all those sorts of different experiences. And it's about, when you're on your own, turning that sense of loneliness into solitude, something really fun.
I mentioned earlier how walking is a part of yogic practice. There is another nice verse I would like to share, and it provides a bit of context. It says, basically, with every step in the right direction, the Hindu scriptures are asserting that with each and every step you take in the right direction, you will liberate yourself from sin or negative vibrations and feelings as well. So when you're walking in a way which obviously has a particular destination, like a temple or a mosque or a sacred place, you're clearly going to be benefiting yourself even more spiritually.
Raminda, can I just ask you about the whole sort of economics of this tourism? Because, I mean, in a sense, you know, when you hear about Canton Tales and the crowd, that was the sort of white bar. It was almost more of a working class thing. And then, you know, if you're terribly posh, you'd go to Rome or you'd go to Jerusalem and so forth. Is there a sort of class aspect to the pilgrimage in other traditions as well?
Well, that's very interesting. If I could use the example of Hemkund Sahib, which is in the Himalayas, and it's a place associated with the 10th Guru, Guru Gobind Singh Ji. To get there, you take a bus to a particular area called Gobind Ghat, and from there you walk, and some people even hire donkeys because it's quite higher up and it's quite demanding. It's about 15 kilometers at a very high altitude, but some people even take a helicopter if they can afford to do that. And here's a very stark example of the economics of it. Having said that, those people who are coming from abroad, for instance in UK, who want to go to this place, would still prefer the path of walking. The ones who prefer to do via helicopters are the ones largely coming from places like Delhi and Mumbai, i.e. the upper middle classes of India. So that's a very interesting example of how, even though you've got the means to take a helicopter, you would rather walk. That's how it felt to me as well.
But I think economics is a really important factor and a real challenge to actually developing pilgrimage, particularly in England and Wales, where we see the pilgrimage tradition much more lively. For example, in Italy or in Spain, there's lots and lots of places where you can stay just for education and exercises and so on. And that's something that African governments can do. And I know British pilgrimage trusts will try to recreate that something program that they're doing. But you can often come across where the tradition is strong, examples of gratuity. And I remember staying with a parish priest in just north of Rome. He said to me, "Here's the pilgrim money box." And I said, "Don't worry, Father, I'll put some in." He said, "You can send it to me." I said, "I've got some money, put some in. If you haven't, don't bother. And if you need some, take it out." And that's sometimes how the system can work.
So now's the perfect time to go back to Alice, because for her, having to walk at her own pace, it brought a new spiritual perspective to this most basic human activity.
I guess the narrative that we've always been given is that whenever we do an activity, it should involve challenge. For me, that is completely not what a pilgrimage is about. It isn't about pushing through. It isn't about missing out on everything. And I need to go much slower anyway. And having a body that goes slow is, I think, such a privilege because it allows space and time for things to unfold the way they're meant to. And yes, with our to-do list and our productivity and all the things that we think we should and need to do, just like we think we should be able to do a walk as a challenge and suggestion of the subcontinent, and then you had the birth of what we know as Pakistan on the one hand and India as we know today. When I was wandering around and in the bag with a whole lot of other pilgrims who were largely Sikh, some of the men were wearing turbans, and we went to this small place in a bizarre in the area with lots of narrow alleyways, and we were actually encountering the local residents, we were meeting them, we were wandering around, and something interesting happened on the way where, because the Sikh men were highly recognisable, an old man suddenly started crying out. His eyes were welled up with tears, and he just said, Sardarji, Mary Hoshiarpur to her, Sikh man, I am also from Hoshiarpur, which is a town in the Indian side of Punjab. And he hadn't been to India since he was a little boy. He left in 1957. And to see this sign of India walking around, even though we were all from UK, we were part of the diaspora, it's only the diasporic Sikhs who can easily access places in Pakistan due to the politics of the region. We had this immediate connection with this man, and he came and hugged us. He, started talking about his childhood. And so there's this lovely bond, and he was crying, everyone else was crying, because not only was this about the moment, it was also about this gruesome history. So there's a lot of pain in that moment of reconciliation, and the connection there was across borders, across religions, because this man was a Muslim man, we were all Sikh, and it was a great wake-up call, I think, to a lot of people who believe in division.
Phil, there's a wonderful book written by a Japanese theologian called Kosuke Koyama, and he talks about 3 mile an hour God. And obviously in the Christian theology, God becomes human in the person of Jesus. 3 mile an hour is the speed the average person walks, probably about 1.5 for me. But I think God somehow works at that speed, and that particular pace is somehow has resonance with the divine. Does that strike ring bells with you?
It certainly does, and I think there's something about a journey where you're constantly grounded. When your feet are on the ground, you're moving at a natural pace for you, where you are able to contemplate the beauty around you and to encounter people in a way that you can't do going fast. If you're flying, you get to one airport and you're disgorged somewhere else a few hours later, and there's nothing about the journey or the pace in between. And I think we need time till we can understand the place. And sacred places are important because they ask us, well, why are so many places desecrated in our society?
3 miles an hour also allows us to sense the places around us, through vision, through hearing, through touching, and that kind of multi-sensorial aspect is what you capture through the walk when it comes to walking to various places.
So my thanks to Professor Raminder Kaur, to Sri Radharamana Das, to Phil McCarthy, and to Alice Sainsbury. And if you want to hear more about walking, there is of course the legendary Claire Balding doing her ramblings on Radio 4 on Thursday at 3 o'clock.
Charles Fraser. Beyond Belief, Why We Walk was produced by Rebecca Maxted and James Leasley. Next week, Charles will be hearing from a street preacher to find out how religious people evangelise in our secular society. Bit of a gear change next this afternoon on Radio 4. Heavy metal, according to one recent poll, is the most downloaded music genre in the world. How do metal musicians perform and rebel under oppressive governments? Rage Against the Regime is next.
A new government, new ministers, new people battling to be the voice of the opposition. So much has changed, but I'll still be trying to understand what makes those people tick. Their stories, their values, their backgrounds. There's more than one way to interview people. And on Political Thinking, it's a contrast to what I do in the day job. Not newsy, not an interrogation, a conversation. Join me, Nick Robinson, for a new series of Political Thinking on Radio 4 and BBC Sounds. Starts this Saturday afternoon at 5:30.
BBC News at 4 o'clock. Sir Keir Starmer has addressed Parliament for the first time as Prime Minister. Sir Lindsay Hoyle was re-selected as the Commons Speaker. Sir Keir told MPs they have a responsibility to improve the reputation of politicians.
The need to restore trust should weigh heavily on every member here, new and returning alike. We all have a duty to show that politics can be a force for good. So whatever our political differences,
It's now time to turn the page, unite in a common endeavour of national renewal, and make this new Parliament a Parliament of servants.
Rishi Sunak replied as leader of the opposition for the first time, wishing his successor well and saying sorry to all the Conservatives who lost their seats at the general election. Sir Keir will head to Washington tonight for his first overseas trip as Prime Minister. He'll attend the NATO summit tomorrow, where support for Ukraine is expected to be at the top of the agenda. Yesterday, at least 42 people were killed in Russian missile strikes. In Moscow, Vladimir Putin has been meeting the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Mr. Modi told him the death of innocent children was painful and war was not the solution. Junior doctors in England have held talks with the new health secretary, Wes Streeting. The British Medical Association says more negotiations are expected next week, and there are currently no plans for further industrial action. Mr. Streeting said he was optimistic. Dyson says it could cut about 1,000 jobs in the UK, reducing its British workforce by almost a third. The company, which is best known for making vacuum cleaners, told staff it needed a global restructuring to make the business more competitive. French prosecutors are looking into the finances of the far-right leader Marine Le Pen. The investigation focuses on allegations of fraud, forgery, embezzlement and irregular loans during her failed presidential campaign in 2022. There's been no comment from Ms Le Pen or her party. BBC News.
How will the new government's communications strategy differ from what's gone before? In half an hour on
metal, and I love the community backing it up. Sabbath's music came out of the fear of nuclear annihilation and wars across the globe. They were 4 working class lads, angry that other poor kids were getting sent off to die. And ever since then, metal has been protesting against all kinds of political injustice. But there are some places in the world where such thoughts and such music are literally a matter of life or death. Today we're focusing on the Middle East, which has seen decades of turmoil and turbulence. Because there's one thing we know, hard times result in great art. And we've seen a wave of metal bands create a vibrant and volatile scene that fights backwards.
One Iraqi metalhead told me in Baghdad, you guys are Spanish, we lived our lives. There were stations that came out long after it's blown up. An RPG.
This is Mark Levan, musician, professor of modern Middle Eastern history at the University of California, Irvine. His books include Heavy Metal Islam and Headbanging Against Repressive Regimes.
There is the musical sonic power. If you just looked at it on a spectrograph, the sound of the guitars, how wide they are, the power of the blast beats. So the music itself is very big and powerful and fast and strong, and it propels you. And then on top of that, you put brutal lyrics, brutal singing and highly political lyrics. It becomes very politically salient, but also very powerful, very cathartic. As an Iranian metalhead once said to me, you can't imagine how a music about death can affect life. How the catharsis of listening to it can really help you have hope for the future. And in a region where many was different, norm, these scenes became places where people bonded in very profound ways. These genres have political power to sustain skills and the skills to take that underground music scene. Turns out to be skills that skills to take that underground music.
So I was told in the other people that
and you have a festival here who tries to sabotage the match. So it's like you are making some outlets that are next to each other, but you just have to find a way to connect to each other, and then music was like a match.
This is New Frank Strawberry, the guitarist and singer of the radio band Confess. They play a thunderous blend of hardcore, thrash and groove metal. It's heavy, hard, fast. Since they formed in 2010, the band has released 3 albums, beginning with Dominion in 2012, 2015 to Super Dreams, and most recently Revenge at All Costs in 2022. Nikan discovered metal at 13 and immediately was for a drum kit. His man genuinely suggested the guitar and said, he founded Confess when he was just 15. In the band's early days, the metal scene around was vibrant and underground. Bootleg CDs were shared between mates and merch was smuggled in from the
world. Performances were subject to strict mental oversight.
First, you have to go and ask for permits, and then you have to do it under educational purposes for the music students. In so many situations, the show will never finish because somebody come on stage and say that's it. You say I have permits, but they say we won't let you do it. So we decided that we never get into their game because if I have to censor myself and dumb it down to the point that a religious cleric or people who work for them agree with my art, it's a disgrace.
So Confess never played live. Instead, they found a global audience on the internet. Their lyrics were defiantly political, and made no secret of the fact they were speaking out against the Iranian government, criticising organized religion. It was their second album, In Pursuit of Dreams, that put them in the radar of the band's revolutionary crowd. The track, Going Within, includes the lyrics, I escaped from the jail of the laws, I washed my brain before they washed mine. The album also had tracks called I'm the God Now, New World Order. These songs were interpreted by the Iranian government as a direct threat.
It was safe until it wasn't. Me and my girlfriend, we were out, and everywhere that we go through town, I could see the sky. My girlfriend started asking me that, do you think that we're being followed? We got inside and know that the answer is yes. I remember I was in Subway, and I kind of made the U-turn, but he was on his phone and was like looking around to find me. I was surprised him with my presence. Where are you going? You've been asking me for 5 hours. And then he just went away. But I knew that there was something going on.
And then, on the 10th of November 2015, they came for him.
8 a.m. in the morning, I'm in bed. And 10 guys, they rushed inside the house with a warrant. They confiscated my computer, books, instruments. My mom asked them, where are you taking my son? And they said, Evin Prison.
Evin Prison in Tehran is where political prisoners have been held since the 1970s. It's notorious for dire conditions and accusations of human rights violations. Nikan, who was only 21 at the time, was arrested along with his bandmate, 19-year-old bassist Arash Haqqani. Both were accused of blasphemy and propaganda against the state, and thrown into solitary confinement.
There is a piece of carpet with a blanket and pillow there. Absolute silence. You don't hear anything. There's no clock. There's no mirror. The light never goes off. You can't really tell is it a night or day, and you're on your own.
Not knowing when it would end, they lived an existence of disorientated fear. They would later release the track Evin, which includes the lyric, solitary confinement will be my casket.
Twice a day they were coming and picking me up and taking me to another building for interrogations. How long you been doing this? Who are you in contact with? Have you ever had any guests from abroad? Papers and pen, write it down. They read it, they don't like it. Tear up the paper, give me another one, write it again. I'm not a criminal, I'm just a musician, but to the system, you're part of the opposition.
In all, Nikan and Arash were held in solitary confinement for 3 months, before spending another 15 months in prison, and they hadn't even been tried yet.
And I remember in the first trial, the secretary, he looked at me and said, just go inside the shit zone. I said, I'm sorry, I'm a kid, I didn't know what I'm doing. And I told him that. Every time I see myself in the mirror, I feel like I always a coward.
Metal is a global family, and in the outside world, people were raising their voices in support.
All the major media outlets, they were talking about these 2 guys in New York that went to jail, and they probably will be executed because they have charges of blasphemy. There was this hashtag, Free Confess. At one point it was the 8th most viral hashtag on Twitter in 2016. And when we came out, we noticed that we got prison. This case got even bigger and bigger and bigger.
Finally, they got their day in court. They were sentenced to 6 years each, 5 years for blasphemy, and 1 year for propaganda against the state. At that moment, they knew it was time to get out. The Revolutionary Guard confiscated the
into my sport. He was able to cross the border into Turkey. He and Arash were eventually given asylum in Norway.
I knew that it's going to be cold, but I'm always okay with that. It's black metal, so you don't need to explain this genre of music to people.
Soon after arriving, Nikan heard his sentence had been increased in his absence from 6 years to 12 and 74 lashes. But if the regime thought that would silence them, they were wrong. In 2022, Confess released their third album, Revenge at All Costs, which was inspired by their harrowing experience at the hands of their own government.
Revolutionary Guard is an army. An army could not stop us. Revenge at All Costs is something that will be there forever. So that basically survived everything, and I made an honest art out of it. Last September, we played a show in Berlin, and some people were coming to us, and they were from Iran living in Germany. And in this one case, someone said that I drove 300 kilometers just come and see you guys. And it meant a lot for me. Like, I cannot express how much I have gratitude for this.
Listening to Confess's story takes your breath away. It makes you realise that so many of the things that we take for granted, others are willing to die for. Unfortunately, it's far from unique in Iran. In 2017, members of Arsenes, a death metal band, had to flee the country after being charged with Satanism. And while Death Tune, another death metal band, were given permission to perform gigs, they were arrested at their fifth show. Mark again.
The reason why is the Islamic Republic is still run as a kind of theocratic regime. Its justification for rule is that it's applying Islamic law and maintaining this identity of Iran as a conservative Islamic country. Almost every other country in the Middle East and North Africa, really Morocco and Indonesia for the most part, is trying to be much more modern and is trying to move away from being identified primarily through the enforcement of religious laws. Whereas in Iran, it's still useful to scapegoat musicians who are doing some kind of Western music which has a history of seeming subversive.
In the Middle East, anti-religious messaging is perhaps the most dangerous part of metal, and offenders can be brutally punished for it. Satan has been a motive to attack metalheads from the beginning.
In the 80s and 90s, when it's first coming out in the Middle East, this was a time when conservatism was on the rise, when political Islam was becoming very powerful. And of course, a genre of music which is so subversive to an authoritarian patriarchal order is going to be on everyone's radar. And also because these regimes were cracking down on religious groups who challenged them, they needed to show at the same time that they were supportive of the kind of conservative religion that was dominant in the society. So the easiest target would be, of course, musical subversives, and nothing is more subversive than metal. So by the late 90s, 97 was the real year, you had these satanic panics all over the region. And that really pushed the scenes down until bands like Massive Scar Era come of age in the mid-2000s when metal starts opening up again.
My name is Shireen Aoun. I play in Massive Scar Era.
Massive Scar Era are an alternative metal band from Alexandria, Egypt. They merge chunky riffs with traditional Egyptian instruments for an intoxicating, elegant sound. And what really sets the band apart is Shireen's extraordinary voice. That overlooked the banks of the Nile, it quickly became a hub for all kinds of cultural events, including metal gigs.
Isami was very particular. He was a smart man with great power, and he knew that he wanted to play by the rules. I don't want anyone to smoke anything illegal, so let's ban smoking in the first place. So,
2011 was the start of the Arab Spring and revolution in Egypt.
Within the barricades of Tahrir Square, there is safety in numbers. But out here on the street, outside the main demonstration, the leaders, the agitators, even the ordinary people that are attending the protest are being picked off. Intimidation is rife.
To organize an underground music scene of any kind, you need to be able to let people know about your music, spread the word, spread the music, organize shows, create a community that can communicate with each other and get together without being repressed. Well, that's the same thing you got to do. The transition between a subculture and a counterculture is where the politics and metal is intellectual in a way that other genres at that point weren't. So many of my friends in the Egyptian scene most famous political prisoner in Egypt in the Arab world. And,
No, I don't know what you
I
do.
met him 20 years ago at the medal. Other famous journalists who became part of some of the most important progressive political parties, all of them came out of medals. And when Tahrir won the revolution after 2011, all of my friends in the scene were on the streets. They were running Tahrir. They were organizing the revolution.
What do you want to
They knew how
have?
to do this. But at the same time, there was already this sense going with that women were not going to fare so well under whatever emerged.
如果你有冇食晒嗰啲嘢？
The aftermath of protests and social
橙都
unrest,
食咗啊？
Muslim
嗰個
government
cheese 食
power.
咗啊
When I
？cheese
heard
好唔好
that
食？
took over, I did not have any problem. I remember.
係咪每日都擺個
she's
cheese
never
喺嗰
gonna listen to
度？
this, but I always remind her. Her name is Neda. Neda Emmy. God bless her. When the Muslim Brotherhood took over, I was like, yeah, okay.
阿 Daniel 係咪每朝都好遲先得翻嚟？阿 Daniel 係咪每朝都好遲先翻學翻學校？
Their interpretation of Islam is different than your interpretation.
我今朝送完阿細 B 去 nursery 之後，先見到佢媽咪送佢翻學校。
One day Shireen was at work and her manager brought a national newspaper to her desk.
And he said, Shireen, you worship the devil.
There was a picture of her on the front, under a headline, Devil Worshippers in Egypt.
I was like, what the hell is this? Phoned the venue, they're like, yeah, someone filed the cases with all these bans. You have to go to the police station.
What happened was a lawyer for the Muslim Brotherhood attended a metal show at the El Saudi. We took notes.
陣間可能會送俾我哋，可能會有 text message 喺Amazon 嗰度嚟。如果有嘅話，你同佢講話，將個 parcel 擺喺嗰個邊後邊邊。
Is this kind of like a ritual that you know?
未有啊，唔知幾時送嚟嘅，但係如果送嚟嘅話，佢可能會俾 text message。
Natural reaction for
嚇有啊！
are being ignored. Like the lack of space. The amount of emotional and mental labor that we do just to get our point across. It was the only place where I can actually scream when people clap at me. It's so natural. I wonder why men scream. Not everything.
Whereas confess were being deliberately provocative, for Shireen this came completely out of the blue.
I was scared because it's punishable by death or jail time. Then the owner of the Saudi Culture Wheel, with all his restrictions and all his, checking the lyrics, actually came beneficial because he was like, I know every band, I know their families, I know them ever since they were kids. And he finally went to the media and he confronted him one-to-one. The case was dismissed after because, of course, there's no evidence that we were promoting anything.
It was dismissed. Shireen no longer felt safe in England.
I left. I sold everything that I have and I went to Canada, continued playing metal music, only to find other barriers.
She hasn't found it easy there either. In 2017, she fell foul of President Trump's short-lived Muslim ban preventing from touring. She's been able to tour the US since, and is now doing incredible work buying metal at bizarrest ceremonial rituals. The Muslim Brotherhood tried to stamp her ban's fire, and scapegoat didn't earn the support of people.
Using young people as a scapegoat to justify its rule, how to alienate a whole generation. They failed pretty miserably. Regimes have gotten much more sophisticated. Partly those would be subversive is that the regimes don't like them. But now the regimes want to buy you out. Yeah, come to Saudi Arabia. Promise you, GPS will give you money. It started around but then it started giving money to metal bands out there. Basically co-opted them. So that when the revolution started, a lot of the bands took the mouth shut. So what happens to metal if it's not subversive? Let's go.
你打電話俾媽咪，叫媽咪俾 message 俾爸爸，話玩乜嘢，之後佢就會 send 俾爸爸。嚇 ？WhatsApp 打電話。
Hello, this is Alex at my office. Mother would like
have an impact. Both families that Halas, first metal bands before Arabic.
That's all thing. It's like mixing the Arabic.
哥哥問食乜嘢喎？嚇，你唔係問要食咩？
The second album is Arabic one. And that's when you hear those showing all those little secrets in discussion.
This works because metal is a complex intellectual form, and so it's
會帶埋細俾入去。
Halas aren't the only metal band that uses the transcendental forms. Last year, Mathorian folk metal band that we played last spring
你覺得爸爸可唔可以抌低你同埋細邊喺屋企嗰度再去 shopping？ 好似唔同喎。嚇？
And at this year's festival, the Indonesian trio hosted mascot walking stage wearing hijabs. There is no world music section. It has the ability to cross borders and unite ears to so many different cultures.
But also inside they see something that they don't expect, or not closer they don't expect to see a Palestinian kid, wearing leather pants with some flying feet and screaming and headbanging on the stage. That distorted the image of what they have of Palestinian people. And because we do that, it's like we're bringing and representing our own culture on Western stages.
Metal is a platform that has been silenced, demonized, revolts, and for Abbott, metal music is bigger than religious and political differences.
I don't think this is unique to Israel and Palestine. It's unique to metal as a community. It's one big family, one big tribe. People think that metalheads are mean, but they're like the sweetest people ever. If you're in a mosh pit, the first rule someone called is the mosh. We're there for the music, and that's the thing that, brought people together.
In 2013, Halas joined their close friend, Israeli metal band
Papa?
Starting
Starting from next Tuesday, next Tuesday， 你係冇呢個乜鬼啊？Drama Club 係咪
So many different flags.
So you
one
will off school at 3:15.
But I've been
Is
so
that correct?
on the tone of some of the reports.
But I can't get there at
As
3:15.
always, they focus on the wrong thing. Oh, Israeli and Palestinian band on a group.
Can you go to library?
Coexist together. Of course, they coexist together. We coexisted together since before 48. We always lived together. It's not about that. It's about being together. And people were like.
So do I need to tell the teacher or you will tell
It's
it?
not about like
Me?
you two
Okay.
an Arab and you and Abbas, and they didn't stab each other. It's stupid. It's dumb. For me, it was very heartwarming because being a Palestinian who grew up in Israel, we don't really have connection to the Arab world whatsoever. We can travel to Egypt and we can travel to Jordan, but that's it. So it meant so much, to be on stage and see Moroccan fans holding our Palestinian flag. Can't describe it because it's like we're not allowed to be connected with those people. So it meant so much.
哥哥，
In 2014,
你記唔記得 Class 生花啊？
Metal Award at the Metal Hammer Golden
你想唔想去
Voice,
睇啊
and they insisted it should be a joint win with Halas. Accepting the award, Orphan Ram
We may go there in
said,
October.
Metal music has succeeded to teach politicians a lesson of how easy this might be if you only wanted. Since 2014, the situation between Israel and Palestine has deteriorated significantly. But back then, it was a small act of resistance that represented hope and a way forward. And it ignored the established narrative that these two bands should hate each other simply because of where they come from.
In the Arab world, we are treated as Israelis, and in Israel, we are treated as Arabs. For the radical extremists, they don't want us to be doing that because, in their own eyes, we're normalizing the relationship with Israelis, and on the other side, we are humanizing the Palestinians.
Then we don't think about what they do as PR, but if you want to visit a country that you haven't been to before, you go on the FCO website and it tells you whether it's safe or not, quickly and efficiently. If you want to deal with most kind of family tax issues, or you've got a symptom that you're worried about, you go on the NHS app and have a look at the symptom tracker there. Government communications is not about people about spin. What it's actually about is how the government communicates with all of us. And, you know, if you ever lived in the US like I have, you try buying a house or paying your taxes and dealing with governmental agencies in America, the language is unclear, you can never get on. In this country, it works really well. You know, what is it that PR people do in government? Let me give you one example. The Department of Health has a stated aim of halving the rate of stillbirth, neonatal death, brain injury and maternal death by 2030. Very serious thing. The rate is far too high in certain communities in this country. What's that going to do with the communications? Well, a team at the Department of Health used 25 different short films it made in different languages, which is disseminated through two charities, AHBA and the Caddy Fancy, the celebrity reviews for his named daughter. And they reach pregnant women, especially at risk. And the result has been a marked decline in unnecessary deaths. Now, as I say, I think if you think of government PR, if you want to call it government PR, 95% of the sort of PR iceberg, if you like, are these types of people who are civil servants working behind the scenes. And you don't hear of these PR people. Some of the people that cause problems are often ex-journalists that come in as spin masters into number 10, over-organized, and that is where the problem is. And that is the thing that Keir Starmer needs to address.
I completely agree. And let me hazard a guess. I think the GCS is probably the biggest in-house communications department in the country. And quite right too. It's got its separate leadership. It's got its own CEO called Simon Boyle. It's got its own plan. And it's very interesting. If you read the annual report, they talk about we change behaviours for the public good. The things you've talked about, from road safety to health promotion. We need to foster a culture of innovation. David, it's not quite in the thick of it talk, is it? There's actually serious communications day to day. Now, David, you and I have talked about the lobby. Let's just talk a bit more about the lobby system. I have to say, when I was at number 10, I was so surprised that this was an old-fashioned kind of secret society, mainly middle-aged white men. And this is the important thing, with special access to the number 10 machine. They are given in-person briefings twice a day by me or my deputy or my deputy staff. With no TV coverage allowed. There were kind of arcane rules and customs as far as I remember. There's a chair in the lobby. We actually discussed with Gordon Brown and others scrapping the lobby system altogether because it just seemed even then completely out of date. I actually wrote a proposal that went via Gordon Brown to Gus O'Donnell, known as God, DOD, which proposed, instead of having a lobby system, these kind of closed sessions for a group of especially suggest weekly live televised ministerial briefings to replace the daily lobby. Now, why was that such an important potential move? Because trying to feed the voracious lobby twice a day, get ready for the lobby briefings, follow up, is such a huge allocation of resources. Thank you, David, with unclear outcomes. I'll just tell you a quick story, but just will bring it to life. So in the height of the financial crisis in 2009, there was the whole recapitalisation, essentially bailing out of UK banks. And it was a big political story, and I took a huge amount of time and effort one particular day to get my brain around the mechanics